Hi, my name is Stefanie Puckett. I'm from Synergy Mind Consulting, and I'm happy to contribute to the Resilience Week that is organized by Comparative Agility. It's great to be invited and be able to be a part of it and contribute with my perspective on the topic of resilience, which might be a little different from what you hear in a lot of other speeches. That is because, first of all, I'm a psychologist, so I'm bringing in the psychological view of the topic of resilience. And the other aspect that makes this speech maybe a little different is that I would like to just pull from the knowledge we have around agility, which with its methods and processes helps us to deal with uncertainty and deal with complexity, two of the big list of issues that can create stress at work and make resilience necessary. So I'd like to put those two topics together for you today to try to give you some actionable advice on how to increase resilience, mainly within the workplace for you. I'm the CEO of Synergy Mind Consulting, which is a consultancy based in Germany, and I focus on leadership development, executive coaching, assessments, and around the Agile Culture Code offer a range of 360-degree feedback, etc., and surveys. So feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is going to be displayed at the end of this speech. So let's talk about building resilience at work with the TEC model, which is the model from the Agile Culture Code. First of all, I like to point out a small little detail about the whole concept of resilience. It is an after the fact issue. So if you look at this definition from the American Psychological Association, that says that resilience is basically the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult and challenging experiences. It's a way of adjustment to external and internal demands. It is a reaction. It is after the fact. So what is the fact? The fact is the difficult or challenging experience we face and external and internal demands that are so high or so much increased that they basically are more than what we can cope with. That is the real problem. This is a fact. Being confronted with experiences or environments that are so difficult and challenging for us, same with facing internal, external demands, that they simply exceed our usual coping strategies. This is, and only then, is when we actually have to talk about building up resilience. And I find this very important because it also gives us two basic insights. One thing is being better in adapting and adjusting. Yes, it has to do with my personal resilience, which we can work on. We can strengthen our resilience and build it. But the other big thing, maybe the bigger thing, is the environment that asks and demands resilience from us because it's simply too challenging and too difficult and too demanding. This is where the Agile Culture Code really comes in to tackle, yes, complex issues, uncertainty, high workload. We can cope with this, but we need certain circumstances and certain elements within our work to be able to do so. And these are described in two of the facets from the Agile Culture Code, which is transparency and empowerment. I'll get to those in more detail. First, a small introduction. I like to just showcase the issue at hand, which is work-related stress. Work is the most common cause of stress in general. If you ask anyone around you why they're stressed or if they're stressed, they're most likely going to say, yeah, it's work. So really, this is where we should be looking at the first place. In general, stress levels are on the rise since years already. I did put together these numbers a year ago for a customer, but not a lot changed. So here the surveys are referenced. 60% in those surveys, which were our global surveys, experienced increased work stress. It's on the rise. 25% even report burnout symptoms. This is how it impacts the people. But then, of course, there's an impact on the company as well. 50% of the work-related ill cases are caused by stress directly or by things like anxiety, depression, which we know might also be caused or increased by work-related stress. Work-related stress also increases voluntary turnover by 50%. Well, what does that mean in simple language? If you're very stressed at work, you're more likely to look for a different job, which can be pretty costly in times where the demands for qualified people is high. It could be advised that companies make sure to keep the stress in a normal range so we don't have more people leaving the company. And then there's another thing which I would like to point out right at the beginning. It's called the spillover effect of stress. In one of the surveys I was reviewing, 70% report that the workplace stress does affect their personal relationship. 70%. So most of the people that did experience work-related stress say, yeah, it spills over into my private life. Negative spillover effects then by impacting our relationships, for instance, of course, creates another source of stress that we then have to cope with. So it's really something we have to look at from a holistic perspective. How stressed are you at work? And how well are you able to cope with that? What do you experience? We experience, and this is a very simple graph that shows the stress and the job strain, a term I like because it describes how stress in the job can put a strain on you. It wears you out, with the result that satisfaction, work satisfaction, our well-being, and our performance decrease with an unhealthy amount of stress and job strain occurring. So what can we do about it if we face that kind of demanding and challenging situations, to not fall down through this graph of performance, motivation, and well-being? We can work on coping strategies, and we can try to build up our resources. As mentioned in the beginning, part of resilience does lay in yourself. This is true. We can build up our resilience and strengthen ourselves. This is just something I would like to drop with you, because it is a good angle to also work on yourself and become more resilient. The first aspect of it is to deal with the stress and find more healthy ways to deal with the stress. One thing is to start identifying and tracking your stressors as well as your reaction to them. So a lot of people I talk to that experience stress at work and suffer from it, often they cannot even tell me, well, what is it that really stresses you out? There's silence, there's thinking. We tend to be overwhelmed by general stressful impression and can't always really put our fingers on, well, this and this and this are the aspects that do cause or increase stress. If I do this in this exercise here, I can also start finding strategies to minimize the stressors or to work on my reaction. Often our reaction to stress only adds to the stress. We procrastinate. We do unhealthy, we practice unhealthy habits. Maybe we eat something unhealthy, or we skip sports, or just simply work more. Our responses tend to be not really helping the stress, and in the end maybe even increasing it. So looking at this, what stresses you exactly? How do you react to it? And how could you develop a healthy response as an alternative? Tackle your work differently, for example, and you're structuring it differently. But also establish boundaries. Often what really causes the stress at work for a lot of people I talk to is not not only or mainly the workload alone, it's the demands and the expectations of people around them that they have a hard time fulfilling because of the workload, and that causes the additional stress for them. So if that's the case, and there are certain behaviors or certain expectations that really add a big strain on you, establish boundaries, clarify expectations, say no to certain things, and lastly, take time to recharge. That's easier said than done, I understand, but often it's not only about the amount of time you can have to recharge after work, 3, 4, 5 hours. It's also about what you're doing to recharge. And some of the tips how you can fill this time to recharge are under the building resilience section here. Just take care of your health and fitness. Strike a balance during your free time. What that means is that it's not always the best thing to do as little as possible and just do nothing to recharge. Sometimes you can recharge even more if you're active doing things that create a balance to the demand at work. If you are in a workplace where you have to work very detail oriented, very accurate, then maybe a great way of recharging is during your free time to do something where you focus on the big picture, where details don't matter, where accuracy doesn't matter. Could be arts, could be sports, could be some hobby, it could be a topic that is, very much focusing on big picture or vision or anything like that. So sometimes striking the balance is the key to recharge much more efficiently. Build social resources, invest in your relationships. Practice mindfulness, meditation. If it works for you, a lot of people struggle with meditation. There are alternatives, for example, the progressive muscle relaxation technique, which is helpful for people that have a hard time focusing during meditation. Another way is mindfulness, and the internet is full with great little small mindfulness practices you could start implementing right away. Journaling is a good way to handle your stress. For example, gratefulness diaries are also a great way of making sure that you don't lose track of the positive elements in your current situation. And then lastly, and I do find that very fascinating, there's research that shows that if we personally are clear in what's our purpose and what are our personal goals, and we reflect on these, that fact alone can help us build up resilience, because in that case we see the bigger picture, we see where we want to go, and that sometimes often makes it easier to then overcome the impediments or the hurdles that are thrown in our way. So building or fostering resilience with the Agile Culture Code. The TEC model simply acts as a small key here that answers you or helps you answer the question, I could do or cope so much better with a situation if only ... Fill in the blank and see if you find these aspects within the TEC model. The TEC model consists of 3 elements that originally were developed to describe what makes agile companies unique based on their agile culture. And those are the elements of transparency, empowerment of the people, and the way collaboration is organized, endorsed, and possible. We'll focus on the first 2 because they relate most strongly to resilience in the workplace. So what's behind transparency? We have 3 facets that build it: information, intention, and effect. Transparency with information and data sounds pretty simple, but there is quite some weight behind it. It means that when you are at work and you're facing situations that are challenging, you have to take decisions, you have to finish a task, and yet you're missing information. There's data you cannot access, there are insights you might not have or be able to get from a person that might have it. If I don't have the information I need to do the work based on my standard or to take the decisions I have to take to move forward, this is an incredible common source of stress in workplace surveys that simply ask for or try to rank the most often terms that cause the stress: the lack of information, the lack of transparency or clarity is one of the most often named aspects. One little aspect we might not consider right away is transparency with information also delivers us context. We have all the information in front of us to understand the different perspectives on that information. We understand the context. Where does the data come from? The insight that's presented to me, where does that come from? What does that relate to? Which context does this apply? All those questions help us to interpret information more objectively. And in this little graph here, you see it's often there is no objective way in interpreting data. That's right. It's based on the context. Now, these little two people here, instead of fighting because they only see parts of the picture or have only one small part of the overall information, if they understand the context, what side am I looking at of this topic, they would be figuring out really fast it's the same thing and just a matter of perspective. But that requires transparency in information. Intention and plans, that's the second component of transparency, answers also just a different question. If you're confronted at work with a new roadmap or some decisions are made, plan changes, big visions, that's usually there for you to swallow. Try to understand it. If you have a lot of transparency with information and data, you might even be able to find your own arguments supporting this new direction, or you can somehow see how data supports the claim that might be behind this decision or a new direction. But transparency with intention and plans helps you not to waste your valuable cognitive resources listening to rumors, guesswork, trying to find out why did the boss, say we go left instead of right. Why is the company making those big changes? What's behind it? What's the true intention? And based on those questions, this is how rumor spreads and how we waste countless of minutes and maybe hours a day trying to find information, do this guesswork, speculate over the intentions that the decision makers have. This is an unhealthy behavior that binds a lot of our mental capacity. And what it also does, really effectively, it disables trust. It undermines any trust I might have in my superiors, in the management, or in the company. So the TSC model advises that if we want to create a work environment where people can be their best and work at their best, we need to be very intentionate by explaining the reasoning, at least the reasoning, behind our decisions. Be transparent about, what was I thinking? What were we discussing in the management team? What were the data and the information we had available? And how did that lead to a certain decision? Because all we want to do is try to keep our company alive. Or all we want to do is, maximize short-term profit to, for example, get a competitive advantage to then, help our company be successful more sustainably. What is the intention behind the decision? There is a lot to unpack behind this factor. And one thing it does for sure is if I know why certain targets or objectives are set, I can become creative in finding even better ways to achieve these. I do feel involved in the decision making. I feel respected because somebody cared to really share with me the intentions that are behind their thoughts and decisions. Now, the third component is transparency with result and impact. It's the effect component of transparency. In this picture, we see two different pictures of one guy that's a little maybe stressed, unhappy, because he's doing a lot of work day in and day out. He's supporting the colleagues, he's doing things for the customer, and it feels like producing things within a vacuum because he has no idea. Was that the right thing he did? Was that important? Did that make a difference? Did the colleague appreciate the extra time he spent on formatting the Excel sheet? Was this new product feature really something that was helpful for the client? Do they even use it? I don't know. This leaves us feeling at the border of simply being useless, wasting our time on stuff that has no impact at all. It's not important. Something that people suffer from, that we don't like. It gives a certain amount of dissatisfaction, but on a deeper level, the feeling of uselessness or meaninglessness of what we do at work. Remember the spillover effect of stress. There is a spillover effect here as well, and that impacts our feeling of self-worth. Nobody likes to feel useless, to feel not needed, not effective. It's not good for us, and it doesn't stay at the workplace. You don't leave it behind when you leave the office. So let's look at the other side of this picture. This guy looks pretty satisfied, maybe happy. I wouldn't worry about him so much. Well, why? Because he might have just gotten an email saying, hey, thank you so much for putting this extra detail in the Excel sheet you just prepared. Made my day, saved me an hour of my work time. Cool. This is great to hear. Makes our work meaningful. Then he gets another email from the customer that just experimented with a new feature saying that is a huge difference to the customer, helped him tackle an issue he hasn't been able to tackle before. Those are examples, but what it is resonance. You understand and see and feel the impact. Could be in metrics, could be seeing real-time data, how your new marketing strategy is performing. If you see some numbers going up, it's great, it's rewarding. And that's what is behind transparency with the effect. More on a work-related topic. If we have this, if we know how our work and behavior impacts our colleagues or customer or work environment, we are able to steer much better. We can prioritize the tasks that have a high impact, that create more value. It does empower us to steer our work much more efficiently and effectively. And now, doing this, understanding the meaning of our work in terms of effect, but also in terms of intention, also helps us to reduce waste. So if we are able to identify a task, maybe even one of those tasks, that really stress you out as non-value add, or as simply not important, not significant, then enhancing meaning also means reducing waste, getting rid of those tasks. Now, speaking from experience, when I work with clients and we go through, all the stuff they have on their desk, we're usually able to identify at least a few things, sometimes little things, but simply, crossing them out on your to-do list, deleting the folder. It's no longer your business. You don't have to care. The fact alone, by putting things to waste, getting rid of some responsibilities, tasks, or expectations that might be not justified, helps us immediately, eases our load. Now, the need for transparency, and that is why the impact is so tremendously, it's deeply rooted within our biology, within our psychology. Putting it in simple words, people want to be informed. We want the expectations to be crystal clear, another very frequent cause of stress at work. We want to have access to the information we need to complete a task. We want to take informed decisions. We want to see the outcome of our work. We want to understand why we do what we do. And we don't want to waste our time or energy on rumors, and we want to be able to trust. So ask the questions. If you feel like these things are bothering you in your work currently, ask the questions. Ask, how did I perform? What was the impact of the work I delivered? What was done with it? What impact did it have? Why is this project so important? What does it lead to? How does it connect to our vision? And what exactly are the expectations associated with this certain role that I'm facing? And also, talk about the why. Information, intention, and effect are the three areas that help us. Transparency does provide meaningfulness, and there is a lot of research from the organizational and occupational psychology that proves in a lot of experiments and studies how transparency helps us to perceive meaningfulness at work. When you hear meaningfulness, we often think of the bigger purpose, and then we think of our own work situation. Do I really actively help saving the world? I'm not so sure, but having this cloudy purpose is not really what we need to have the experience of a meaningful work. Meaningful work can be delivered by having transparency. And what does it lead to? There are hard facts, nice psychological research done over decades that does prove if I perceive meaningfulness at work, my job satisfaction rises, my motivation rises, my willingness to go the extra mile rises, I feel more committed to the work, I experience more inspiration within my work, and I do perform better. And on a somewhat deeper level, we can even measure impact on general life satisfaction. And it can lead to better physical health. Do it. Talk about the way. Now, the second component within the TEC model that helps us to foster resilience is empowerment. Empowerment, again, consists of three aspects. One is freedom. That means that I have a maximum room of maneuver, wiggle room, where I can take micro decisions, how I'm going to do my work. It can start with remote work options, flexible working hours. Those are very common and concrete examples, but it can be more than that. It can be the freedom to decide how I'm going to tackle a task. What tool do I want to use to solve a problem? Who do I want to work with? Who do I want to consult? Do I want to do this now or in the afternoon? Do I want to do this from home? Do I want to don't do it and let it rest? Or, start from scratch on a clean sheet of paper to try to get some ideas. This kind of wiggle room and freedom we have in doing our tasks, this is what we need to be creative. Think about the clean sheet of paper when I can simply design my own work, my own job. That is something, and it also, and that's very important in the context of resilience, it offers us room and opportunities to adapt. If work demands are changing and I am in control about how I manage, structure, and organize my work, I'm also much more in control and able to adapt to spontaneous requests, to changes in the plans. That is wiggle room, that's room to adapt I have. Now the second one is enablement. Behind empowerment in the core is that, with transparency, we give people the information and the access they need to take their own decisions. With empowerment, we allow them to actually do it, to act on those insights they gain in a transparent environment. And enablement is a big part of it. That means that you have somebody that supports you, taking your own decisions and following through with them, that makes sure that you have the resources you need, but also the qualification, the knowledge, the competencies you need to fill this role or to solve that problem. Is there to strengthen you back, to give you the authority you need to act in a certain role to get your job done or to solve the problem within the organization. And the third component is handing over ownership. Now, if you have a topic, and I do find this very interesting, if you think about the projects you handle right now, the different tasks you have on your desk, and you identify those that stress you out the most, more often than not, those are exactly the tasks or projects where you have the least amount of control over the way things are going down and the way things might end, right? Control over the success of the projects, because there's a lot of independency on other stakeholders, on other teams, on certain developments you cannot control. So taking ownership, companies that do it very good, they help you to find an end-to-end perspective, to take full ownership, to get done what you want to get done. The need for autonomy that is behind empowerment, again, is very deeply rooted and is, together with our need for meaningfulness, are two of the biggest drivers for motivation and satisfaction at work. So the need for autonomy expands and helps us once we are empowered and we do have control over our own work and can determine ourselves to a high degree how we're going to act. We learn faster, of course, because we can also make our mistakes, right? We have the opportunity to experiment with something we find meaningful and that will get us ahead, so we learn faster. We gain mastery of our tasks much faster if we self-steer our efforts. It does lead to higher individual performance, more creativity and innovation in the output. The work results in general go up. And again, a little different perspective here. When you empower people to take control or to handle issues themselves, what happens is they do start more actively coping with problems in general. They get out of the victim mode, it's all stressful and I can't do anything about it, into, you know what? I got it. I can do something about it. And that expands into other areas of your work life and probably also your private life. The exposure to stress gets reduced because we can move some levers around that helps us ease off the stress. And I find this interesting, may elevate fatigue or exhaustion and cognitive difficulties. There are experience behind people are facing very complex and difficult tasks in a lab setting. And one group get the intervention to say, oh, by the way, you can take extra time, you can use paper, pencil, or you can use your computer, just giving you extra options. And the moment this intervention happens, cognitive difficulties decrease. We are able to focus better and solve problems better. Now going to the more psychological level of it, autonomy. If we're empowered at work and we feel we have autonomy, we have increased well-being, less emotional exhaustion, less emotional stress and strain of the work. And if you think about work that is highly characterized by emotional stress and strain in the service industry, healthcare, for example, everything that helps, every little bit of autonomy will help to ease off that strain. It has a positive effect on mental health and on physical health. Now, there is question around if I'm too empowered, I got too much freedom at work. Does that stress me out? Does it stress our teams out and the people that work for us? It might. If I feel like there is so much responsibilities on my shoulder where, again, that exceeds my scope of control, the scope that I can actively influence, that can cause stress. Now, what I can do about it is insert the so-called second order control. Again, this is freedom, this is control we give to the employees or to ourselves, to also set a boundary here, saying this is too much responsibility. I don't want to handle this or carry this by myself. These kind of decisions, I need you to support me or take them. This is too much for me. Second order control, still within the range of empowering people, but also empower them to set their own boundaries if they feel the need to. Now I would like to point something out. If we look into the psychology of stress, and it boils down to the perceived threat. A change happening or a new direction that usually involves uncertainty, which we see right here, which can be perceived as a threat. And a threat is perceived if the threat potential is bigger than our perceived potential to cope with this. And now, facing uncertainty, we cannot really estimate, how much workload is this? Will this exceed my competence, etc.? We don't know, so we automatically perceive it as a threat. In this situation, reducing uncertainty by providing as much transparency as you can is helpful. Now, the second part is, and we see this a lot in change processes, which are also known from research to cause extra stress if there's any organizational change happening. And this is if our primary reaction when things are still uncertain is a negative one. It's hard to change our minds. We already said, I'm not sure about that. I don't agree with this. I'd rather keep things the way they are. So we kind of expressed an opinion, chose a side. Now, it's difficult to change this. It has to do with cognitive dissonance over a decision we've already taken. And now what's very helpful here, because usually the way it works within change processes is more information becomes available as we go, because we also, a lot, especially social systems, we cannot foresee and predict the outcomes of every little change initiative. We have to see, observe, and learn. And making this kind of information available through a transparent process, transparency in all those three levels, I allow people to collect this new information and do a new appraisal of the situation, based on what I've seen so far, and know now, is it really that threatening? It might not be. I might see clearer. So the threat of uncertainty is less through transparency. And now here's where empowerment comes in. Threat potential has to be higher than our perceived coping mechanism. Now, the more empowered I am, the more freedom and control I have, the higher are my opportunities and my possibilities to cope and have an influence on what happens, be able to steer it into a direction that I can live with, that works for me. So building up empowerment, increasing it, leads directly into a perceived increase of coping mechanisms, coping opportunities. So you have transparency and empowerment as the key components to reduce the perceived threat of any change, any new development, or any situation you might be in. This is where we get also a link to agility and working in agile ways, because we do learn by inspecting and adapting and iterating our way to the solution. We are in a pretty good space, and we reduce uncertainty as we go. So the TC model as the key. And maybe again, you want to just take that opportunity and fill it in for yourself. I could cope so much better with task X, project X, situation X, whatever you have, if only. Now think about increasing transparency or increasing empowerment and your freedom to take action. If you're interested in the Agile Culture Code, here's the reference to the book written about it, which you can get in any bookstore or in Amazon. Reach out to me. I'd love to hear your feedback, your thoughts on this small speech within the Resilience Week. If there is anything that you have in mind, on your mind, any feedback you would like to provide, reach out to me. Down here is my email address. I'm very happy to hear and see the effect of the work I did. So help me perceive this as meaningful as well by getting back to me with your feedback. Thank you so much for your time, for listening, and I do hope you got some valuable insights or takeaways you can apply. Bye-bye.